Well, hey there, and welcome to episode number 503 of 6 Pixels of Separation, the Mirum Podcast. My name is Mitch Joel. It's Sunday, February the 28th, 2016. Let's get on with the show. So, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Mitch. I'm Avinash. I'm the Digital Marketing Evangelist for Google and the blogger at Occam's Razor. Old-fashioned blogger.
I know, me too. I was just actually thinking, do you ever say your last name to people, or do you always just say I'm Avinash? Or just so many people mispronounce it that you don't?
Yeah, I was like, it's Avinash, and I don't have to. It is enough,
It is
right?
enough.
Because I'm not Sam. If you're Sam, you got to say I am Sam Worthington, and then you're like, oh, okay, Sam.
Right.
I have the luxury of having a name.
And you also get to be like the Madonna of digital marketing this way.
I don't, you are too sweet. No, 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 no. But it was a combination of things, and it was just easy. Just say Avinash, and I tell you, like, this is the kind of nerdy thing that only you and I can appreciate. But a joy and delight of my life was to get the @Avinash Twitter handle, on which someone was squatting. So it was not easy, but it's @Avinash. Yay!
And I'm lucky. I don't think there's another Mitch Joel. And
Yeah.
I don't mean that like, there's no one like me. I mean, there's just not another person with those two names. So
No, there is also no one like you. It's
that's
like
why. Yeah,
everybody in 6 Pixels knows that.
exactly. So this is what I'm going to be calling the improv episode, because I feel like we haven't connected in a long time. Typically, when I bring people on, it's because they have a book or something maybe newish going on. And I'm sure you have new stuff going on, but really it was more about I haven't spoken to in a long time. I'm really curious about what you're seeing in the world. Everyone knows you're the digital marketing evangelist over at Google. You're not speaking for Google. You're speaking as a person who just sees a lot of stuff. What has been the thing right now for you that is sort of hot and bothered under your collar?
Several things. I think that, it continues to bother me that people are chasing shiny objects and people continue to go from thing to thing. And make a career limiting move and be precise. What is bothering me? But just, we had the Super Bowl here, as you know, and perhaps around the world. And one of the stories that just crossed my radar was this study about how Gatorade did, not a study, a pimpy thing that crossed my radar.
Right.
Where they said Gatorade did a little Gatorade shower thing on Snapchat, and the agency and Gatorade were pimping how it had 160 million impressions, and they broke through the clutter and the noise. And there was just and this is very classic marketing thing that continues to happen. Now, doing a Gatorade shower thing on Snapchat is wonderful, but it was illuminating to see that there was such little thought about why they were doing it.
So hold on. I want to hold you there because let's frame what happened, because I know this story too. So basically, Gatorade, instead of buying a Super Bowl spot, decided to go full bore with Snapchat. They had one of the Williams sisters do the classic sort of dump the bucket of Gatorade on her at the end. The idea with the Snapchat was that if you engaged with it, you could actually put yourself in there and have the Gatorade dumped over your brain, and the brain freeze, I guess it would be a nice spell. And the idea is that this generated, I think it was something like 100 million impressions, which gave them an average CPM, and this was the big part about it, of about $3.50. Contrast that with what was happening at the Super Bowl, where obviously the CPM is significantly higher. You're in a cluttered environment. There's multiple. And so basically the story is that Gatorade on Super Bowl day was able to use Snapchat to reach more people at a much more effective CPM. And this made them, in some instances, what we would call a quote unquote winner. Now rant.
No. I think it's true, and there were several things that were interesting. I mean, the first thing is like the fact that the story somebody had to send me the story, and I read it when I have read every Super Bowl coverage. was for me a tiny red flag for the celebratory dance that was going around at Gatorade headquarters, because they did not break through the noise. I just you do a quick Google search about Super Bowl things, and they didn't. But the bigger one is I kept saying, like, what was the purpose of it, for and it was not 100 million, in the Pimpy post, at least, Mitch. It was 160 million impressions. So even bigger than what you mentioned. But I kept saying, you do a quick Google search, how many people are on Snapchat, right? 100 million or so. How many of them are international? 60% or so. And then how many people are paying attention? How many times? Blah blah blah. And you break it down, and you're like, you said it yourself, Mitch. It was 160 million people. It wasn't 160 million people. It was 160 million impression.
Right.
Perhaps from roughly, if you be exceedingly generous, maybe you could say every single human in America that was paying attention on Snapchat on Super Bowl day. So say 20 million, right? And that's being exceedingly generous, right? And so the metric used was to do the celebratory dance. We see applied across multiple things people do on TV, using Google's double-click platform, on Facebook. The metric itself is crappy, that you lose sight of what you're solving for. And multiple platforms do this. That's why I wanted to use this example. Not to say it's a Snapchat thing. For me, it's the Gatorade marketer thing, right?
So, but I think that go ahead.
And then the other thing that also was very important is, like, you and I have done podcasts related to how do you measure social media, and to me, what would have been meaningful, as we've discussed in our past podcasts, is how many people actually use the filter, because it was a custom filter. Now that would be an illuminating metric, because he was like, these many people actually did the thing we wanted to do. Was it 2 million, 1 million, 5 million, or to use our metrics from before, it was conversation rate. What was the conversation rate? Or what was the amplification rate? So how many people amplified Serena's post, Serena's Snapchat post? Is there anything related to that? It's like, these, as a marketer, these are meaningful things that show me I had an impact, rather than I was driving on a road in a bus and billboards were on the side of the road. We're still there on a platform where we can actually think smarter. So there were two facets of this, right? What were you solving for? And did you really break through the clutter? And the second one is, like, we are so beyond actually measuring the number of billboards on side of streets. We can actually measure better things. And it kind of broke my heart that despite that, in pimping this thing, the marketers, again, I'm only talking about marketers, and we would judge every platform the same way, that they're still stuck in 1903. Those were two things that particularly sort of were tough. And you've been trying to change the world so much, with both of your books, and the fact that in the largest places, people are not taking advantage of the simplest things that can be done now is something that was troubling me a bit.
Well, good. I think you opened up more than a can of worms for this conversation. And I want to go and sort of like now pick at each worm that I think is the fat and juiciest and the one I want to stomp on first. So
Yes.
one is that I'll tell you this feeling that I have now, and I think you're going to resonate with it. And then I'm curious what we do about this. So I believe that if I go back 10 plus years and how much time you and I have actually known each other and been talking about the space, and you've highlighted some of these things that we wanted to happen, but I think you highlighted them as one Avinash would in your analytic way. I'm gonna sort of summarize it in the way that I will, which is philosophical and theoretical, or I guess theological rather than theoretical, which would be that I loved what was happening digitally because I felt it was an opportunity for brands to create what I called at the time real interactions between real human beings. That brands could have this more human way of communicating, more human way that would resonate with the audience, and it would create this ability to have conversations, to create tools of utility, and on and on and on to where we fast forward to where we are today, 2016. When I think about the story that you just told, and I'm going to unpack some of the other stuff later, but one layer of it, it's just that also what bothers me the most is social media has really become just another paid media channel.
Yes.
And I feel at my core that's the most disheartening thing. And to the point where I'll be working on proposals for potential new business and we'll be talking about the social media component, and team members will turn back to me and say, it's just a paid channel now, Mitch. What are you talking about?
No, it's
not that they believe that, but they know
yeah.
the client believes that it is only a paid media channel at this point.
I concur with you. I was listening to a speech that Mark Zuckerberg gave 2 years ago, not even 2 years, like 2 years ago, not 10 years ago. And all this about the power of social, bringing brands together, being authentic, relationships. And at the moment, every advertising product you can buy from Facebook, the best social media network at the moment in terms of audience sizes, everything you buy is just spray and pray. And it has done well for them, right? And it's the fact that we're back to spray and pray, and that's the best we can do on this amazing platform with 1.6 billion people. I don't know. Maybe you and I failed at our jobs.
But the other side to that is it's spray and pray with better filter and targeting a little bit for sure. I mean, there is that. I have seen instances where I'll see something and be like, wow, this targeting is actually quite intense and smart. And if I reach out to the person who's doing it, they're very strategic, very intelligent, spending very wisely, measuring accurately, doing great things. The other side of it is, and it relates back to this Snapchat Gatorade Williams moment, is that it was celebrated not as a moment for Snapchat, it was celebrated as a paid media moment. And to me, again, that was the other part where I just sort of sunk a little bit lower in my seat. There's nothing wrong with paid media. It's just there's this tool allows us to do other things with consumers. And I feel like we're rejecting the body, like we're rejecting the limb on the body. We're just like, it's not working. And I don't know why we're so quick to reject it and be okay with marketers as it being primarily a paid channel.
Yes, I agree. One of my hypotheses as an answer to your insightful question, Mitch, is that in most companies, the size that you normally work with, which tend to be large and extra large, not medium sized, and I have the privilege of being in the same category of clients, or cursed, either way. And my hypothesis is that the vast majority of money is still owned by people who grew up spray and pray.
For sure.
And it's just a generational thing, and we need to let that pass.
I don't think it's generational, Avinash. So let me push back a little bit. I think what's happening is that you have these massive media companies that have to defend a long-time infrastructure and a long-time business model. And it's not that they're not evolving. It's just because they have power and can tip scales in certain ways, why wouldn't they do that if they could? And again, it's like, listen, my company is owned by WPP. Go and look at how much money WPP spent with Google. I mean, this is serious, significant money. It's not one company, WPP, it's many, but it's those media entities, and they're huge. They need to defend those business models. They can't let them go.
This is exactly. I mean, for the Fortune 500, it's very true. Exactly as you described. And for me, Mitch, maybe I'll ask a question from your very unique perch. Is it true? Would it be fair to say that brand marketers are incapable of thinking about creative ways to actually relate to humans? For them, it is just easier to say white women, 24 to 26, in Phoenix, who like the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And that's just like, you know what? Screw everything else. That is easy for me to think. And now let me do quote unquote branding. And it would be hard for them to understand the nuanced complexity that exists in their quote unquote targeted audience.
Well, yeah, I mean, so here's the answer to the question in a very non-answering it directly way is those are the same people who get up on stage and talk about big data, machine learning now, we're doing marketing automation, we're falling. And I watch these brands do it and I'm like, are they kidding me? Like, I mean, forget the fact that I could sick Avinash on you with just 4 or 5 generic Google searches and completely implode everything you just said because you can't even get a keyword targeted ad to a right link correctly. But I think it's like this strange sort of like posturing going on where there's almost like the haves and have-nots, and the haves aren't the big brands. The haves are actually the small, nimble, startup-y like people who realize, hey, I can use these tools of automation, of machine learning, of on and on and on and on to just do things in a lot cheaper and a lot smarter and a lot more targeted way. And I can't believe for the life of me how you would think this technology was built to scale, and the actual opposite is happening, that it's being most efficiently used by the smaller people who are real brand managers, brand advocates, brand ambassadors, and the other people are simply managing something, whatever
Yeah.
that might be.
Yeah. No. I agree. And to me, going back to one of our the core heartbreaking thing in there is that going back to one of our earlier episodes where you'd helped me introduce See, Think, Do, Care, the business framework that I'd created to this audience. There is such incredible creativity and strength and glory in truly solving for the see intent and truly solving for the care intent with digital. And I think what is the result of the discussion we're having is there is the death of C and especially the C intent cluster. I think just our inability to do something glorious there is sad because there are hundreds of millions of people there and tens of millions, as if I think about like TD Bank, if I think about Canadian Tire, if I think about Expedia, and our lack of these problems mean we can't solve for the C intent, and that is heartbreaking. All we can figure out is how to solve for the do intent, and the decent ones will solve for think. And that's good, but the problem is your audience size is in the hundreds of thousands, not tens of millions. And in a way, as a champion of the web, as a champion of digital, as a champion of customer true love, it makes me sad that we can't solve for that intent that is in tens of millions of people.
And I know you work for the company. I'm not asking you specifically about operations with it. It's not what we do. But what's interesting about that comment is that Google, as a massive organization, a massive player in this, actually did not split up, but did divide the line between performance and brand, because it was almost like this sort of left-right thing. Like, we need the brand, so we need to explain to CPGs and bigger players where the Google ecosystem works for them. And on the performance side, we don't want to discount the fact that we can do this highly targeted, very sort of math-based, data-based way to engage. And it is one of those stories where it depends on the type of brand manager you're dealing with, because a lot of the people who are so performance based lose out on the brand side. And then you have people who are on the brand side who can't think about the performance, and we look at them and think, well, they're sort of being wasteful, aren't they? And it's amazing to me that after 15 plus years of this, we're still there.
I agree. I have always rebelled against the thought that it's an or that there is a line between them. It's an and. Right. You got to do great brand and you got to do great performance. It is stupid not to do performance because you're saying, I don't want to make money for my company. That's insane. And to say that all I will do is my strategy is focusing on do and think and just performance is insane, because there are millions of people that you need to connect with, and there is enormous possibilities for brand in see and care. So for me, it's an and I've rebelled against the fact that there's a dark line. And even at Google, we have platforms like search that are a lot closer to think and do, which are closer to performance, and YouTube, which is much closer to see and care. And Facebook falls in that category squarely. Snapchat falls in that category squarely. But it is interesting that the moment I met one of the largest advertisers in the world on Wednesday, and they were still like, how can I drive store sales on Facebook? If I can't, goodbye.
I've been in those boardroom meetings for that where, and you get strange comments. Like, I've been in boardrooms where they'll say things like, we don't consider engagement a valuable metric anymore for Facebook. And I'm like, but that's the metric. It's like you can't sort of hide from what the metric actually is or say it's no longer valuable to you because you want consumers to do other things. I want, my whole joke back was I would like Facebook to cure cancer. It doesn't mean it will. Just because you say you want people to suddenly buy from you because you're on Facebook and you have all these people who like you, it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. One of the maybe we'll close this part, Mitch, with like a positive thing that comes in because
Is there one?
and it is sparked by two thoughts from you, and I'll coalesce them. And one is that neither you nor I are saying even remotely that digital is only it or TV is bad or anything else is bad. It isn't. You got to have a portfolio strategy, and one company that has done. And this again goes to your second point about small companies is Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club launched with that cute video, which every startup launches with, and then proceeds to die in 3 months.
Right.
And instead, what they have managed to do is actually launched as usual with a viral video that really did go viral and millions of people saw it. But then they managed to figure out how to create a sustainable business out of it. And now you will see Dollar Shave Club ads on TV. And now Gillette is being forced to respond by having a Dollar Shave Club type offering, only a lot more expensive and not well thought through at all. And Gillette, meanwhile, hasn't figured out how to do the thing that Dollar Shave Club has managed to figure out with digital channels, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, search, everything, right? But to me, this brings two thoughts together. One is none of us are advocating a pure digital strategy, as is evidenced by even what Dollar Shave Club is doing. But also that you don't need to be thinking all it takes is one night stand viral video to go quote unquote viral, but that here's a company that did it on a sustainable basis, built a nice business, is still not like Gillette is not going out of business, but they are so worried they have to launch competing offerings. And Dollar Shave Club is also using remnant inventory and TV, which they can buy very cheap, and power to them. So here's a good example of bringing some of these threads together. Does that make sense, Mitch?
No, totally. And so one of the other worms in the can of worms that you opened up on the Super Bowl Gatorade Williams Snapchat story is this chasing of shiny objects. And I'm curious about, are you saying that basically Snapchat is the new shiny object and that's what we're jumping to? Is it that there are many more shiny objects? And the reason I'm asking this is because as the evolution of these digital platforms and channels evolve, what I'm actually seeing is not this sort of, wow, there's a lot of fragmentation. I'm actually seeing the opposite of fragmentation. I look at it now and it's, the four horsemen. You've got Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple. If you look at the sort of media models, it's Google, Facebook, right? Facebook has Instagram, Google has everything Google has.
Mm-hmm.
When you say new shiny object, is it basically Snapchat is the new Twitter, or is it that we're seeing a proliferation of more and more shiny objects? I'm sort of starting to feel like the shiny object thing is somewhat going away. Like it's not as sort of like there's not so many of them as there were a couple years ago.
Here's how I would frame it. So let's go back to the overall goal that Gatorade had. Is that so they were never contending to buy a Super Bowl commercial. That was not even in the play. What they said is, can we do something disruptive to break through the clutter? That was the goal, right? And great goal. We all remember one of my favorite examples is, of course, what Beats did with the Last Olympics. Right? Totally subversive, broke through all kinds of things, disrupted without official partnerships with the Olympic organization, just beat the crap out of everybody else, like Bose, who was actually an official sponsor. So I am for disruptive, crazy things to be done. But once Gatorade decided they're going to figure out how to disrupt its Super Bowl, their instinct was not to say, what are all of the places where we could do this, where we could find the largest bang for the buck? They're like, oh, you know what? Everybody's talking about Snapchat. Maybe we should do a custom filter. And then they never thought, is it better? Maybe it is better. Oh, to buy a small 3-second video on Facebook. Maybe it would have been better to use Instagram's most recently launched advertising where everybody's spraying and praying, and heartbreakingly so, by the way. Like 3 ads per 20 or 15 pictures is driving me bananas. But that's the shiny object thing. It's like they quickly say, oh, here's something, Snapchat. Snapchat is a nobody in the world should think that Snapchat is is a transient thing. It is a solid platform with a solid audience, growing every single day across the entire world, parts of Africa that we would never have imagined growing. So that's another part of it. They never thought in a more clever way, if our Uber goal is that, maybe they should have sent letters to every single person. And that would have been, for the amount of money spent on this activity, they could have gotten 320 million Americans to have gotten letters. And wouldn't have been disruptive that a good old, this gloriously sexy company with every athletic sponsorship known to mankind figured out how to send letters. That's the part that bothers me.
And you would have revived the U.S. Postal Service at the same time. It would have been absolutely fun. Although there's no weekend delivery, so they could never have done this on something. It's Avinash, terrible idea now that I think about it.
No, but maybe they should have. So here's the thing. Somebody wrote this post. I'll try and find it for you. What could you buy for the size of a Super Bowl commercial?
Right.
And they said, okay, these many Facebook things, these many Google search things, these many Intel things, these many blah blah blah. And if you look at those whole bunch of things, you see so many more things that have been more impactful. But just this quick thing, let's go get a handful of people, because it's just a handful of people, and we'll bait and switch the world and just say impressions is the thing that succeeded. It just, ironically, it is a lack of creativity and evaluation that breaks my heart. I do not think that Snapchat is a flavor of the month that's going to go away. There are many others in that category, but not Snapchat.
Well, I'll tell you what Snapchat has done in an evolution way that I think is massive and that so few people are talking about it. And I'll tell you what inspired it is actually a slide that you sent me. We were together in Mountain View, and around that same time, I can't remember who, maybe you remember, there was a slide deck going around about the state of digital.
Yes.
Who was that? Do you remember who it was from?
Michael somebody. I shut my browser to have
that's right,
clarity in our voice, but
right.
But we can send it. We can add it in the show notes. I'll send it off.
So there was one slide in there, and I don't know if you remember it, and it was looking at how many unique visitors were visiting a whole bunch of these sites. That was along the bottom axis. On the vertical axis, it was time spent. And what was very noticeable to me is that the channels were very much sort of like scrunched into the bottom left-hand side of this graph. And what I mean by the channels, it's things like Vice and BuzzFeed and HuffPo and all the cool Reddit, all the cool places that we like. Right. But if you wanted to move closer to the sort of upper right of this chart, which is the direction everyone wants to go, it was platforms that we would define as networks. It was things like Netflix and YouTube, and Snapchat sat there. And I stared at this slide for like 5 or 10 minutes, and I thought, why is Snapchat there? And I realized I see why. When you're on Facebook and when you're on Twitter, you're sort of thumbing through your own feed, and that feed is curated for you by algorithms and by the core thing, but it's one feed. You're just flicking through it. Rarely do you click on the person. Rarely do you click through. You will now add whatever emotion you want on Facebook. You will add your comment there, and you'll continue down your feed. Snapchat isn't one feed or channel. Snapchat actually developed a network. So I go to you. I go to Vice. I go to and by doing that, they've actually built a network within this platform, not a channel. And that little nuance gets people hooked in a huge way. You have people literally, they get into bed at 8 and they spend the whole night hopping through channels on Snapchat, which you don't do in a Twitter or Facebook-like environment. You just don't have that same type of usage. And I'm not saying they very thoughtfully did that. I have no idea whether they did or didn't, but it winds up putting them to talk to the validation of why you're bullish on them, and I think I'm very bullish on them, in a very different way than all of these other quote-unquote social media networks have done to date. And I find that fascinating, that one little usability thing completely changes the dynamic of how people spend time with it, and that network model is massive.
I agree with you. There is the underlying thing that I thought is that there is almost a proactiveness that you need to bring to Snapchat that causes a deeper relationship with the platform than the others. Because the other one is like, close your brain, your feed is going by. That doesn't work in Snapchat. And this is a good thing, exactly as you said. But is this positiveness related to related to you having to be proactive in order to do this. And I think that that was a very, very clever thing for them to create, and much, much kudos to them. And they have sustainably grown. And with a deeper engagement per visit, per session, number of pages, images, whatever you want to use, than we've seen through some other platforms. And the presentation I just remembered was by Activate and Michael Wolf. So to give him full audio credit as well.
And it's an amazing presentation. So it's probably still valid today. So it's interesting. We talked about that Snapchat Gatorade thing. We talked about the paid media component of it. We talked about chasing the shiny objects within that. You talked briefly about that impression-based model, which it frustrates you. It frustrates me because I think you're right. They're not fair comparisons. It's like TV, like digital. And I just think that that's insane. What I've been saying to a lot of people, and I think it ties into this sort of other little worm I want to talk about, is that I find it hard sometimes when I'm speaking to very senior brand people, because they're talking about impressions and I'm there thinking about how can your brand actually make an impression on people. And while the Gatorade Snapchat example obviously did make both an impression and created a lot of impressions, you touched on this, and I'm curious if you want to sort of go into this a little bit more, and I'm happy to. This idea of so what? Like, you chose Snapchat because it's cool, and you basically did this thing with this unique filter, fantastic. You engaged them on Snapchat, but then what? So that's the one night stand thing, right? So it worked, but now that you have them and they are connected to you, now what? Like, is it just another pony trick, the next thing, or can you actually start taking and making Gatorade to Snapchat what Red Bull became to video and the web?
Right, and that's this last part, Mitch, pure platinum, not gold, platinum, because there is nothing in the story that suggests that this was a part of a plan that is anything beyond a one night stand. That's I would now this is the so I live at the intersect at marketing and analytics. So I'm going to go to the analytics bubble a bit. I would humbly push back on you and say, I am not sure I would say it worked. We don't have enough information. It worked in the sense that you and I are bitching about it right now. And then, okay, that's fine.
It made it that far down the funnel.
There you go. Happy birthday. Your Super Bowl was disrupted, right? But I would say, at the very minimum, in the most charitable scenario, we have no idea if it worked, because to your point you just made a few seconds ago, we have no idea if this meant that more people are now in touch with Gatorade on Snapchat. We don't know that. We don't even know. I would have been a minor indicator of success if I were the CFO, CEO, whatever at Gatorade. CMO, I would have said, okay, how many people use the filter? Right? Isn't that more for me to give you my few seconds of my attention, Mitch, and say, I'm going to take this, I'm going to do something with it that's going to take me a few seconds, and I'm going to amplify your brand. That is way more precious than pimping out. We had 160 million impressions. Was that 16 people? Was that just Serena Williams and her halo? One person doing it? We don't know that. So I actually actively push back against this idea that it quote unquote worked. Now, if you were trying to say that we found 2.5 million people on Snapchat, and those 2.5 million people are so influential, they reach 160 million Americans. They're like, all right, disruption. Well, we don't know that much, right? And it's highly unlikely they did that, right? So for me, I would push back, and that's the problem. So I tend to think of this. I did this post a little while back, and I call it, I had two ladders of awesomeness: the marketing ladder of awesomeness and the analytics ladder of awesomeness.
If you like See, Think, Do, Care and you don't know the ladder of awesomeness, it's like two pieces of Lego that just snap together with perfection. So we'll put links to it in the show notes, but awesome, go on.
Thank you, Mitch. And the rung that is missing on the ladder of awesomeness is impression. That it doesn't even exist because it is so bad.
Okay, so you've convinced me, Avinash. Let's forget that it didn't work, but let's go back to this idea of put the impressions aside. We agree it's about making the impression. It's about engaging them. It's about now that you've made your almost like you've popped the cherry of your brand on Snapchat, and so now you're there. What is it like? This is their opportunity to be the Red Bull of Snapchat, right?
That's exactly right. No,
That's
no,
really where we're going here.
that's exactly right. And I think Gatorade and every other brand in the world absolutely has the power, capability, and money to say we're actually going to create a home. I use this old-fashioned word, home on Snapchat, where we understand the intent of the people and contribute content that then they in turn amplify to their followers and people they're connected with, and take advantage of this network effect you talked about, Mitch. To the extent that we become the Red Bull of drinks, what Red Bull has done on YouTube, what Red Bull had done on their owned and paid platforms, Facebook, everywhere else.
So here's the other.
That I think is a great, fabulous use of Snapchat and great, fabulous use of marketing dollars from Gatorade.
And it aligns with the users and how users interact with
That's
content and
exactly
what they
right.
want from it. It's easy to say, well, Vice is successful there. And what people don't get is, once I'm done looking at Avinash's silly face or someone getting a bucket tossed on them in Gatorade, the way Vice is creating content, they're creating in a way that they understand their place and role in an environment of Snapchat where they're another channel in this network and how it's going to flow through. And the reason I'm saying this is because I had a meeting several years ago when Facebook was actually at the place Snapchat is today. So it was just sort of really hitting that sort of ascent spike that just makes that hockey curve part go really, really kooky. And this was a major, major brand, and they had been doing work with a major charity. And I'm not going to reveal names because it's not relevant because the story is good without the names. And what they had done is they had created a Facebook page for this charitable group, and it had accumulated, we're talking millions, 10 plus million people who had liked this page. And again, at a time where you could actually speak to all these people and connect to them, and Facebook wasn't throttling this for both logical and illogical reasons. And I remember sitting in a meeting and the conversation was, okay, and by the way, they basically abandoned the page post charity, post like the big event for the charity. They basically abandoned it. And now they're like, okay, so we have all these people. How do we convert them over to our corporate page? That was the challenge. And I was like just smashing my head against the desk going, one is you gave up. You basically abandoned that page. And now it's like, it's just like this vanity metric, as you would call it, that you're going to pull over. To what benefit? They are not customers. They joined it for charitable reasons or philanthropic reasons. They didn't join it to, buy your damn product or service. It's not, it's not there for that reason. And when I saw that Snapchat, and I've seen others that are similar, and I'm not picking on Gatorade at all. It could be any generic brand XYZ doing something on Snapchat. I see this stuff and I'm like, you know what? Those channels are destined to be abandoned in the network. That this isn't like the thing where you're just going to buy something and, oh yeah, I remember now Gatorade or whoever brand is there, and because they paid for the ad, and now I'm going to go back. It's not going to work because people are going to feel jilted. They're not going to want to see your. It's like you. How many channels do you skip when you're doing your, going through the guide on TV? Like you're skipping all this stuff that you already know is of no value to you, and that's the real fear for me with all this stuff is that we're going to see massive abandonment, and again because they're treating it like it's just like, oh, we just bought a TV commercial and that's fine.
That's exactly right. They're doing TV everywhere, or they're doing a catalog everywhere, or they're doing billboards everywhere, right? And like this is a great example. This morning, when I was looking for your latest Instagram post, Instagram has ads. I am on a AT&T network on a phone I purchased from AT&T, and guess what? The first ad on Instagram was. It says buy one get one free AT&T phone. I can actually take a screenshot of this and send it to you. We can add it to the show notes. Think of everything you could do on Instagram, right? Everything amazing. And what are you doing? Buy one get one free. And the worst thing is not that you're being a joker on this thing and interrupting me. I'm on an AT&T phone, on an AT&T network.
Already the customer.
In an AT&T service area. What the hell is wrong with you, right? And this is where creativity goes to die.
But okay, but I want to go down that road because there was very recently an amazing article in Adweek that by the time people hear this, the post will be long gone on my blog, I'm sure. But there was a post that took me aback, and it was basically saying that Instagram has over 200,000 brands advertising on the platform because they opened it up so that people can self-serve, I guess, in 5 months. And I was aghast at this. I thought, like, that's exactly what, again, it's a classic, like, that's exactly what people want on Instagram. 200,000 brands clamoring for like, it's amazing to me how, even in its growth, whether it's opening it up now because there's close to 500 million people on this platform, which accounts for a significant amount of internet users for sure. 10% of all internet users, I guess. Um, it's amazing to me that like that is the strategy of the brand too. Like open, like it sounds almost crazy to me that they're even allowing 200,000 brands to be there.
I agree. But I think this is where it's like you can only be hungry for X amount of time, and then you have to eat some food. And I think that in this case, Instagram has had a free ride for a long time. I'm sure somebody at Instagram headquarters or Facebook headquarters said, make at least some money. And they're getting spray and pray advertising with spray and pray sized money, right? It would have been great if Instagram said, we will pick the 100 best, most creative people who understand the intent expressed on our platform, and we help them create the advertising and charge 10 times more for every one of those things, because we can, for every single thing, we will measure if we change the likelihood to recommend. So just pick 20 advertisers in the world, most creative, and at the end, for every one of them, charge 10 times more price and say, every single time we will say, as a result of your advertising on Instagram, that the likelihood that Avinash will recommend your brand to somebody changed. It's very powerful, right? It would be liberating. Where I absolve, but they didn't do that, right? They're like, the easiest thing in the world to do is say, open the kimono, everybody welcomes, spray and pray. And that money is there are enough brand marketers, enough companies, at AT&T included, that
Many. I mean,
now.
if you saw the list of brands,
So many of them.
it's a Fortune 500.
Yeah.
We're not talking about little players here.
And there is enough pot of money that is around, let's do one night stands and spray and pray on the latest shiny object thing. There are enough of that money lying around that, instantly they see a revenue base. Long term, what are they solving for? Can they withstand TV? Can they withstand Google search? Can they withstand catalog marketing? Think about the what people think about display advertising on Facebook today.
I feel like
it's the lowest, least valued thing in the world. Or think about display advertising you could buy through the DoubleClick platform that Google owns.
Yeah.
And is there a different fate that awaits Instagram? I don't think so.
Yeah, and it feels like they open it up and then they become a victim of it, right? And it's just like, well, now we can't stop. And then it becomes just you're chasing the dragon. Like literally, if there was an advertising definition of chasing the dragon, it would be that. I'm looking up here and realizing we got to cut out of here soon, but there's one other area that I want to talk about, because what has transformed most dramatically, even since we last talked, and I think it's an evolution that continues, is the mobile to web to desktop experience. So we've seen it completely invert. We've all seen the data. People primarily are accessing this technology now through their smartphones. The PC has been relegated to an accessory device to mobile. We all know this. People say, when's the year of mobile? We all know it happened. It's coming. Who knows? But what I am feeling is that the mobile experience in general from brands is still extremely pathetic. They're still thinking about how to be responsive versus how to be what I would call mobile first. And I really do feel like right now, the mobile experience, primarily for brands, is a less than web experience. And yet, from the consumer standpoint, they're like on Tinder and Uber and all this other stuff and Snapchat, and they're sort of looking at brands like, how far behind are you? And brands are looking at like, we have a 9 to 10 month IT roadmap for this. Native apps are very expensive, so we're going to go responsive. Like, it feels to me like there's this massive disconnect in a world where if you were to say to me, what's going to be the biggest shift in 2016? I think the biggest shift we're going to see this year and the next couple years are smart brands, maybe newer businesses or newer, like the next Snapchat, or Snapchat is like this, where mobile is better than the web experience, or the web experience almost is secondary or not important. And yet most brands are not even close to being there.
I agree with you. I think with mobile, to use something you and I have discussed before, most brands at the moment are executing do strategies on mobile when it is a see and think platform. That's the mismatch. And because they can only imagine looking at it through a do lens, they don't invest in it because they're like, it doesn't work. The reality is all of us consumers are on it on massive amounts. If your current digital strategy, digital data, any tool, I don't care, is not showing that 60-70% of your traffic is mobile, you're behind time. So that's where most of the world is. And for that 60-70% of the time, most brands do not understand that the intent being expressed is see and think. They want it to be do, and they're like, if it's not do, F it, right?
Sure.
And that's the big mismatch. And when this changes, I think that we will see better experiences. And for mobile apps, this is the most sort of corrosive on mobile apps, where for most brands we have, they are creating do strategies, whether it is pay your bill or buy our camera or shoes strategies on mobile apps. If I want to have a crappy mobile experience to buy your camera, why would I go through the trouble of also downloading a 100 megabyte app? I could
That's
just do it on
crazy.
your shitty website,
Yeah.
right?
But that's the conundrum is like brands have to solve for the fact that mobile can't be a smaller web experience. Mobile has to almost be more robust, more connected, more in touch, more in tune. It's hard to do that when people haven't downloaded your app or are less inclined to maybe go to the mobile or maybe I guess the mobile site can somehow have some of those components in it. But there's a bit of purgatory there for brands for sure as well.
Exactly, and I think that the brands where we've managed to transform what they're trying to do is to say that on mobile we will understand the intent that is expressed, and once we understand that intent, we will adopt our strategy to ensure on mobile we're solving for that intent, and on desktop we're solving for a different intent. It might have more commercial strength in it. So one of my older examples of this one was because in the interest of time is that when Target learned that most people actually are on their website inside their stores.
Yeah.
Most people are on Target.com on a mobile phone inside the store. They changed the experience so that it will show you the latest deals that are in the store and help you get to them on your mobile phone.
Yeah, and there's so many examples where, again,
Right?
just
Tons
understanding
and
that
tons of
data
examples.
can lead to the intent. So before we go, Avinash, you and I are both been thinking a lot in a world where Facebook, Twitter, and even Google really do control our reach, the conversation, our ability to get messages out there, that we need to sort of get people back to our, it's a complex thing. But one of the things you launched that I want you to talk a little bit about before we bail is you've launched a new newsletter, which I think is a great idea.
Oh yes. Thank you, Mitch. One of the things that the one common thread through our entire podcast today is this idea of audiences and what do you do with audiences? Where do you find them, and do you impression them with Gatorade or with Instagram, AT&T, whatever, right? And so I am a big fan of building audiences on platforms you own and rent. Right, I'm a big fan of that, and you should do both. But recently, I see this trend where the places where we rent our audiences, YouTube, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, all of these other places where we're renting our audiences, increasingly these platforms are beginning to control who sees our story, how they interact with it, and the data that they provide with us. It is becoming much more controlled by them. And so there was this huge furor around the algorithmic feed on Twitter. And maybe that's the right thing for Twitter to do, by the way. I'm not against it to the remotest extent. But the thing it triggered to me is now Twitter has one more ability to control who sees anything I tweet. And that got me started to think if we want to ensure that our large-sized relationships exist only on rented platforms, because for me they only exist on rented platforms. 500,000 people on Google Plus, 200,000 or so on Twitter, 40,000 on Facebook. But all of these are controlled. All my large audiences are controlled on rented platforms where somebody else decides if 100 people see it or 5 people see
They
it.
have their hands on the faucet.
That's exactly right. And they also, in a way, limit my creativity. I can only write these many words, or these, I can have a video, I can't have it, I can only link to it. If I put a video to YouTube, they won't show it, blah, 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 many things, right? And so recently I think that a mistake I have made, that I heard lots of brands making, is our large audiences, we have handed them over to only rented platforms. So I decided I'm going to build a platform I can own. And for me, after lots of thought and analysis, it was going back to a good old newsletter, is to say, here's an audience. I'm going to build a person piece by piece. I'm going to send them a short story every 2 to 3 days. And it's an audience I own, the relationship, the creativity, the faucetness, and it is truly permission based. And I don't need 40,000 people on Facebook if I can get 5,000 who really care for what I have to do. And the newsletters seem to be the best way to manifest it. I'm a week in the last 5 days that I've been alive. I have 1,500 subscribers. That's it, email signups. And these 1,500 people at the moment are giving me roughly 10 times the engagement and connectivity with myself than I'm getting with 200,000 on Twitter.
That's called the marketing analytics intersect. It's funny. Just before we connected here, I saw an email come in from you, and I thought, oh, maybe it's about the podcast, and it was actually the e-newsletter. So I was very happy to receive that. And as always, let people know where they can connect to all the stuff you're doing, Avinash.
The best place is my blog. You can just type in Avinash into Google.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to do this again closer in time so that we don't leave such a big gap between when we chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mitch. Much love.